Today's episode is brought to you by Ewin Racing. So today's video is going to cover some game designers making some very, very bad decisions. And as I write this episode, I can't help but wonder, would they have made all of those terrible decisions if they had simply used a more comfortable chair? If only, in the early 2000s when this story takes place, had these scientists in their labs had access to the newly redesigned Ewin Racing Flash XL gaming chair. This chair can support up to 500 pounds, no doubt most of which is made up of their meaty brains. To help the strain of carrying such girthy grey matter, the chair features a large ergonomic neck pillow. It also has a support pillow on the back to help those who carry the weight of the world. Various adjustable armrest positions to allow any level of thumb twiddling and fidgeting needed to get those creative juices flowing. And a race car style backlean lever to allow them to lean back and gaze up at the cosmos for inspiration. Assembly is easy too. No doubt their brilliant minds could handle the task in maybe 2 or 3 watchings of this very video. All the tools of the trade come included, even this snazzy pair of gloves to let you pass judgment onto your work. But, of course, the most brilliant thing of all that they could be doing is going to ewinracing.com and using coupon code KODOK to save 30% off their entire order, and even get a bonus pillow while supplies last. Still no Shrek Green, but as they say, never say never. That's coupon code KODOK to save you 30%. Go now, and oh god, I'm starting to sound like internet historian while I'm supposed to be ripping on Ristic Studies. In 1818, author Mary Shelley would release what is considered the first work of science fiction. Called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, the story follows the eponymous Dr. Victor Frankenstein in his journey to conquer death itself, planning to resurrect a massive human corpse with the power of modern science. Of course, we know now that the Mad Doctor's schemes were naive and foolhardy, and that he had no idea what his experiments would actually end up creating. Like Prometheus, the story's other namesake, he was playing around with fire, not knowing that he would get burned. Of course, a lot of the things we picture when we think of Frankenstein are more modern inventions. The hunchbacked assistant, the angry mob with its torches and pitchforks, and the monster being an unintelligent brute are all inventions of the 1931 screen adaptation. Even the name itself can cause confusion. Many people will use the name Frankenstein interchangeably between the man and the monster. But in this case, one could not be blamed for confusing the two. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the most popular trading card games in the world. First introduced in the pages of Shonen Jump 25 years ago by the late author Kazuki Takahashi, it came to the United States a mere couple of years after the success of Pokemon's multimedia bonanza, and soon became its closest rival in the Japanese trading card game space. Originally licensed by Upper Deck Entertainment, the Western, or TCG, version of the game has slight differences with the Japanese, or OCG, version, though they're minor enough that the two are basically indistinguishable. Yu-Gi-Oh's rules on the surface are pretty straightforward. The goal is to reduce the opponent's life points to 0 from their starting total of 8,000 by attacking them with monsters, either directly while the opponent has no monsters in play, or by inflicting breakthrough damage, calculated automatically by defeating an opponent's monster. though a monster played sideways or in defense position will stop that breakthrough from happening. Since a player can only normal summon one monster every turn, with higher level monsters requiring other monsters as sacrifice, that momentum is precious. Thankfully, one can assist their monsters with spell and trap cards, which have no such once per turn restriction. Another key feature of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the extra deck, known as the fusion deck during the time our story takes place. This extra deck acts like an additional component of your hand, accessible at any time, but requiring some sort of special conditions to actually use. In the case of a fusion monster, it requires that you have, either in play or in your hand, the monsters listed as ingredients and the spell card Polymerization. These fusion summons work outside of the normal once per turn summoning restrictions, so if you have the right cards in your hand, you can pull out a monster packing a huge attack score out of basically nowhere. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist Kingdom anime, Polymerization is shown as a spell with nearly infinite potential, able to fuse anything and everything into tons of wacky combinations. However, in our reality, where physical cards have to exist, the mechanic was extremely limited, very unreliable due to needing 3 or more specific cards in your hand, and often not worth trading in the monsters for one that is only marginally better than what went into it. Not to say people discounted the fusion system altogether. After all, unlike the even worse ritual monsters, fusion monsters don't clutter up your deck. They're basically free cards, and if there was some other way to get the monsters in that deck out of it with none of their hand-devouring downsides, then that little extra stack of cards could be full of possibilities. It was on this day exactly 20 years ago, in 2003, during the appropriately spooky month of October, that Konami would try their latest experiment. Onto the hard slab and connected to the lightning rods was Magician's Force, the 8th set ever released in the United States, and, as the printing presses whirred to life thanks to a stray bolt of lightning, Konami had no idea the sort of thing they had just unleashed. Magical Scientist is a level 1 spellcaster effect monster. If we look at the artwork for Magical Scientist, we get a bespectacled man in a lab coat, wearing a mullet taken to its logical extreme, posing with his favorite test tubes like it's the picture he'd put on the cover of his autobiography. The artist, sadly unknown due to Konami's strict rules on artistic anonymity, perfectly captures the idea of a man calmly meddling in forces beyond his control. At just 300 attack and defense each, he's not going to be winning any boxing matches, but just like with Victor Frankenstein before him, the mad scientist is known more for their monsters. His special ability allows one to essentially kinda cheat, able to summon a level 6 or lower monster from the fusion deck, bypassing that aforementioned fusion system entirely for the cost of 1,000 life points, and remember, you only get 8,000 of those. On top of that, the monster cannot attack directly, meaning it can only inflict breakthrough damage. Add to this that the 3 strongest level 6 fusion monsters available at the time, Empress Judge, Punished Eagle, and Roaring Ocean Snake, top out at 2,100 attack each, when most meta-defining threats in their weight class were 2,400 or more. In addition, attacking with these monsters opens up the possibility of reprisal through trap cards that the opponent could activate in response. 1,000 life points for a gamble that could backfire, and at the end of the turn, the monsters vanish, leaving behind a weakling that could be toppled by a stiff breeze. On the surface, it seems like a balanced card, even slightly underpowered, maybe able to pull out Thousand Eyes Restrict as a convoluted way to erase an opponent's threat, but otherwise not too remarkable. However, as is seen in so many science fiction and horror stories, Konami did not fully understand what they had created. They specifically forgot about one of the most basic idioms of card game design. The only life point that matters is the last one. It's a common misconception among new players that life points are precious and should be protected at all costs, as shown in the Ristic Studies video, Magic's Best Worst Card. The reality is that life points are a resource as much as any other thing the game gives you. Many games let you pay life points to gain an advantage or preserve your board state by taking a hit to the face that would have defeated one of your monsters. There is no such thing as a Pyrrhic victory in trading card games. If spending 7,000 of your life points will cause your opponent to lose 8,000 of theirs, that's as good a win as if you had not lost any life points at all. And Konami, and the rest of the world, would learn this lesson once Magical Scientist found its partner in crime, Catapult Turtle. Released more than a year before Magical Scientist, Catapult Turtle is most famous for being the focus of one of the cartoon's most nonsensical moments, where our hero, Yugioh, uses it to launch his Gaia Dragon Champion into an opponent's castle, destroying its flotation ring and causing the castle to crush all of his opponent's monsters, leading to an instant win. It's okay if you found that whole thing confusing, as even to Yu-Gi-Oh players it doesn't make any sense, just push it out of your mind. But, as its design implies, the ability of Catapult Turtle is to launch one's monsters over all of their opponent's monsters. Specifically, one can sacrifice one of their creatures to inflict damage equal to half of its printed attack stat as direct damage to the opponent. And do you remember what I said before about how if paying 7,000 life points makes your opponent lose 8,000, it's still a win? The strategy involves cheating out both Magical Scientist and Catapult Turtle on the same turn. One then combines their abilities thusly. By paying 1,000 life points to summon one of those 2100 attack power fusion monsters, you use Catapult Turtle's ability to shoot them at your opponent for a modest profit of 1,050 damage. Doing this 7 times, as neither Catapult Turtle nor Magical Scientist have a once per turn restriction, this gets us a total of 7,350 damage. That's a lot, but it's not quite enough, and now you can't afford to use Magical Scientist again without instantly losing. But you still have ammo left, you see? First, you launch Magical Scientist at your opponent for a whopping 150 damage. Might as well be throwing a roll of toilet paper, and then Catapult Turtle launches itself, somehow, to deal the remaining 500, giving us a grand total of exactly 8,000. Oh, but it gets better. Since this damage bypasses the usual first turn restriction that prevents the first player from attacking, it can be done on turn 1. That's right, Magical Scientist gave Yu-Gi-Oh! Not just a one-turn knockout, but also its premier first-turn knockout. The first turn knockout, or FTK, is the holy grail of any card game player, reliably defeating an opponent before they've even played their first card. In most other games, an FTK requires the stars to align just right, such an unusual circumstance dependent on your opponent's bad luck and your good draw. But Magical Scientist was different. It was consistent, using cards like Reasoning, Last Will, and Gilasaurus to cheat this dynamic duo into play reliably. Not only that, it offered the opponent no vector of engagement. Hand traps, cards which can thwart an opponent by being discarded from the hand, didn't exist with one exception, and that card only prevented battle damage, which, again, this deck does not use. Now, it should be known that while an FTK is a holy grail for players, it is a nightmare for game designers, as it means that the game has broken down on such a fundamental level that it has removed an entire player from the action. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is criticized today for its long and drawn-out combos.
Oh, is it finally my turn? I watched 3 daily dose of internet videos in the time it took for this idiot to do his combo. All for me to just what? Normal summon get negated. Activate a... Oh!
But a simple strategy that locks out an opponent before they can even play anything is a franchise-threatening problem. Unfortunately, anything that Konami put out to try to stop the madness that they had unleashed only worsened it in spectacular fashion. giving the deck even more tools it could use to assemble its win condition with even greater reliability. Combine this with the paralyzing death of 1,000 stings that was Yada Lock, and we have one of the most infamous periods in Yu-Gi-Oh history. It is from these two decks that Konami finally invented the Forbidden List. Yadagarasu's tendency to turn games into a hopeless slog got it hit with the first ever banning in the game in August 2004, but Magical Scientist dodged that bullet until April of the next year. With both barrels of its shotgun empty, Konami breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the menace of Magical Scientist and Yadagarasu were put down forever. But they were not done. For a bit of fun, they decided to take the pieces of Magical Scientist and reforge them into something new. Something different. Surely they would get it right this time. Surely they had learned their lesson. But, lest we forget, a mad scientist is most famous for their monsters.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! In the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
Starting in December 2004, winners of the Shonen Jump tournaments were handed a curious little oddity, a special prize card with the name Cyber-Stein. Cyber-Stein is a level 2 dark machine effect monster. With its stitched-together body, flat-top head, and name, the source of inspiration for Cyber-Stein is obvious. But despite its hulking frame, its mere 700 attack and 500 defense means a silly fish could defeat it nearly 3 times over. But most striking was its ability. Remember, this was supposed to be a joke, a gag, something fun and silly. When Konami was reassembling the pieces of Magical Scientist, stitching it together into this new form, they thought, what if we made a card like Magical Scientist, but gave its effect a price tag so incredibly high that no one in their right mind would try to use it? Cyber-Stein has virtually the same effect as Magical Scientist, but without any of the restrictions. To temper this, it was given the far higher price tag of 5,000 life points, meaning that unless you run aggressive life gain, you can only use it once. And considering that the best it would conjure at the time was the 4,200 power Master of Oz, a normal monster with no additional abilities, it couldn't even profit damage-wise nor combo with Catapult Turtle, falling back again to Magical Scientist's problem regarding the perils of attacking. But yeah, Cyber-Stein was made as a joke, a Magical Scientist that didn't work, a novelty. But, like with the creature Dr. Frankenstein had so foolishly created, Cyber-Stein would bide its time, lie in wait, and scheme.
Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains. Revenge! Henceforth dearer than light or food. Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful. I will watch with the wiliness of a snake, that I may sting with its venom. Man, you shall repent the injuries you inflict.
Cyber-Stein's limited prize card status would keep it under the radar until the start of the GX era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Late July saw the release of Dark Beginning 2, which gave us Cyber-Stein as a basic silver text rare, and thus widely available to anybody who wanted one. But it would only be a little over a week before Cyber-Stein would unleash its collected hatred onto the world with the release of Cybernetic Revolution, a title that would be chillingly appropriate in the coming months. Cybernetic Revolution is most known for giving us Cyber Dragon, a famous card in its own right, but it's the fusion cards that draw our attention, specifically Cyber Twin Dragon and Cyber End Dragon. Cyber End Dragon is one of the strongest fusion monsters ever created, possibly the most powerful of the GX era. Its power may have been lower than Master of Oz, but the fact that it's a machine-type monster gives it one more trick. Limiter Removal. Limiter Removal is a spell card that doubles the power of all machine-type monsters you control, but destroys them during the end step. And 4,000 times 2 is all of your opponent's life points. If not limiter removal, then Megamorph, an equipped spell that does the same thing if your life points are lower than your opponent's. And seeing as you paid 5,000 points to bring the darned thing out, not a hard feat to accomplish. Even if the opponent tries to defend themselves, Cyber End Dragon inflicts what is now known as piercing damage, where breakthrough occurs even against monsters in defense position. Cyber Twin Dragon is a little trickier. Its attack is lower at only 2,800, but it can attack twice each turn for a total of 5,600 damage. A profit! You can combine this with Megamorph or Limiter Removal as well, but the final trick comes in the form of the trap card Ring of Destruction, which destroys a monster while hurting both players for that monster's attack power. Set the card, end your turn, then set off the bomb. 7,800 of your life points in exchange for 8,000 of theirs. So there you have it, a one-turn knockout that can be performed off of Cyber-Stein. So there are a lot of decks out there designed around using Stein as their centerpiece, right? Well, no. You see, the Stein OTK involved combining Stein's effect with cards that could be pulled from an outside source that didn't interfere with deck construction, along with very good cards that people were already using anyway. Stein wasn't in its own dedicated deck, he was in every deck. Due to its ease of use, Stein was splashed into practically everything. It could be in the main deck or in the sideboard, and every high-level game would always have that dread at the possibility of Stein showing up to flip the table. There wasn't really a downside to running Stein. His typing and low stats make him very easy to pull out of the deck, and a lot of popular removal cards at the time had discarding as a cost in case his timing was off. He was just incredibly user-friendly for such a powerful effect. The truth that paying most of your life points to make your opponent lose all of theirs had reared its ugly head in ways Magical Scientist simply hadn't. And its most infamous rise to fame would come at the end of 2006. The date was December 12th. The location, San Jose, California. It was the final Shonen Jump Championship of the year. While Monarchs were the talk of the town, everybody had that Stein in their pocket. Whether in the main deck or the side, he was everywhere. But one player in particular, David Rodriguez of Team Comic Odyssey, was all in on Stein. Featuring a full playset at the front of his deck, David had a few close calls against other decks, such as a Chain Burn deck, which would have been a bad matchup, but the Stein was out for blood that day. At the end, David found himself against fellow teammate Mario Matteo. With a prize split already arranged, the only stakes were for personal glory. But David didn't play around, and what happened next would shake the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever. Unfortunately, it's here that the details get a little fuzzy. Because, you see, from here, it seems that information about this event has decayed severely. Unlike Magic the Gathering, where you can find high-quality video documentation of every single event dating back to the Stone Age, early Yu-Gi-Oh! Is surprisingly difficult to find, even major matches like this. Since it happened in 2006, while still under the control of Upper Deck before the big Konami takeover, there's no YouTube videos on it, and it seems like no footage was taken at all, or if it did exist, it was destroyed by Upper Deck after they lost control of the Yu-Gi-Oh! License in America. I found multiple articles that gave anecdotes about the match, but no proper play-by-play. Even scouring the old Pojo threads gets nothing but pre-game discussion followed swiftly by baffled disbelief, almost like watching a major disaster play out in real time. But it did give me a lead. A link to metagame.com, a long-dead coverage website operated by Upper Deck Entertainment. There was a connection to a link that gave game coverage, and it was gone. Lost to the 404 underworld. But there was a way. Time always gives us a way. A way back. And, with a little manipulation, there it was. Unearthed like the lost diary of a famous despot or the lost charm of an ancient pharaoh, I had in my hands the play-by-play coverage of the 2006 San Jose Finals. Mario went first, setting a single card in his back row before passing for turn. Not much of a turn by today's standards, but considering the prominence of Cyber Dragon, a card that could be summoned for free if the opponent has a monster in play, not out of the ordinary. David responds by setting 2 cards to his own back row, then plays Sangan from his hand. After Sangan lands safely, David uses it to attack Mario directly for a measly 1100 damage. But Mario doesn't respond. Instead, on his next turn, he sets a second face down and passes once again. It looks like the poor guy had bricked. But Mario wouldn't know the creek he was in until his end phase, where David activated one of his face down cards, Ring of Destruction, that trap I mentioned before. But direct damage was not David's intention. Instead, by destroying his own Sangan, he could activate its effect. When Sangan is sent from the field to the graveyard, it allows its owner to search their deck for any monster with an attack lower than 1500. It doesn't take a genius to guess what he was going for. On his second turn, David opened with the card Giant Trunade, wiping out Mario's back row and leaving him with a completely empty field. David then summoned his Cyber-Stein, paid the 5,000 life points to summon Cyber Twin Dragon, activated limiter removal, and swung twice for game. According to commentator Jason Grabermeyer, the game was over in a flash. In between matches, sort of indicative of the mood of the time, there was a brief exchange. Per Grabermeyer's coverage,
"So both of us get that sweater?" asked Rodriguez, pointing to the Shonen Jump championship jacket. "No, only the champion does," replied head judge Simon Choi. "I need that sweater!" exclaimed Rodriguez. Both duelists sided and shuffled for the second duel.
neither of them knew that this game was about to be topped in ways none of them expected. Nobody. Not the judge, not the commentators, nor the players themselves knew what was about to happen. I mean, Mario had bricked, right? Surely that wouldn't happen again. Mario again went first, this time leading with a stronger showing by playing the card Graceful Charity to draw several more cards, dropping a pair of strong contenders in the process. He followed this with a face down to his back row and a monster in face down defense position to his front. He passed turn, again per the Grabermeyer's article.
Rodriguez looked at his hand, then at Mario. He looked at his hand one more time, and looked back at his friend with a grin. "Sorry, Mario."
Wiping out Mario's back row with yet another Giant Trunade, David played Cyber-Stein raw from his hand. Paying 5,000 life points, he summoned Cyber and Dragon from his fusion deck, equipped it with Megamorph to double its power, then attached another spell, United We Stand, which increased it by a further 1,600. Nothing in Mario's deck had a defense high enough to cushion enough of Cyber End's piercing damage to save him, so whatever he had face down, it didn't matter as David swung for lethal. And like that, it was over. 3 turns. David had just won the finals in only 3 turns. Not one game, but a best of 3 game set. 3 turns between 2 games. A self-sacrifice into a turn 2 win, followed by not just a Stein OTK, but a Stein FTK. A going second FTK, but an FTK nonetheless. Needless to say, David got that sweater, along with a copy of Shrink and a whole host of controversy. It was not long before Upper Deck and Konami acted, and on December 21st, less than 2 weeks after the event, it was announced that Cyber-Stein would be abruptly banned from all competitive formats. This was the first card to ever be banned out of season. Normally, the list is updated on a regular schedule, but David's win was so devastating that the emergency ban was forced into Konami's toolkit. There was disagreement as to whether Stein should have been limited to 1 instead of banned outright, but that crashed into the undeniable reality that both games had been won off the back of a single Stein. But, like the monster from the story that inspired it, Cyber-Stein had made its point. Content to drift away into memory on a sheet of ice after shaking the game to its very core. The card they had made as a joke wound up getting the last laugh. The game has changed a lot since San Jose. In future sets, a lot of what made Scientist and Stein so threatening have been thwarted. Many cards have what is now called a hard once per turn, meaning that you can only use the effect of a card once, specifying that even additional copies of that card cannot be used. Hand traps like Battle Fader, Swift Scarecrow, and Effect Veiler were released, any one of which could stymie the whole thing from the safety of the hand, no setting necessary. Many fusion monsters now also include the caveat that you have to summon them the proper way, using only specific cards and an appropriate fusion spell, no cheating allowed. It says a lot about how powerful these cards were when considering what Yu-Gi-Oh has become since their banning, and even though other cards like Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster, absolutely game-breaking cards, have also been unrestricted, the man and the monster remain firmly on the forbidden list, still seen as too powerful and dangerous to ever unleash again. And so, that's twice that Konami got burned by their own creations. And, I mean, they get it now, right? They know better than to create a monster card so powerful that it warps the format, right? They won't make that mistake again, right? Right? Oh, who am I kidding? So yeah, thanks for watching. This was quite an ordeal to do. Like, no joke, looking for that that tournament was an all-night affair. I mean, that's kind of frightening though, isn't it? I can't take full credit for it because it was whoever had the brilliant idea to record it on the Wayback Machine who was the real hero. But think about it. We're talking about one of the most important tournaments in Yu-Gi-Oh! History nearly becoming lost media. How wild is that? Of course, I have my collection here. I don't have a Cyber-Stein, but I actually, turns out I actually had all the fusion cards, too, to go with a Magical Scientist. One that I think I actually pulled from a pack all the way back in the day, so that was certainly a lot of fun. As you can see, I'm in the new place. It's still a bit of a mess, but I'm going to keep working on it, and I can definitely do a lot of that with the help from you guys over at Patreon. I got a lot of help this month from Chaos and Conjuring, Shattered Legacy, Danny, Echo Echo, John Dolan, Justin Hartsock, Universe of Legends, Vaughn, and Weird Warp, who all contributed at the $10 and up level in order to get their names read off on the screen here. You can see we also have our friends at the $5 level, and we have just been having an amazing time at the Discord. They got all sorts of previews for this video. Like, I don't think I've ever gone harder on a video than this one. As I'm sure a lot of you surmised, it is based on the stuff by Ristic Studies. He does some incredible work about Magic the Gathering. I honestly wish I could turn even a tenth of the phrases he does. It's been a wild ride, but this one was fun. It was originally going to be later in October, but I moved it up when I noticed that Magical Scientist was actually going to be having his 20th birthday, like today. So it's been a pretty wild ride. I have other videos I'm working on. I have secured a trip to PAX Unplugged, and we have all sorts of great stuff going on and looking forward to. So feel free to join me on the Patreon, enjoy what we have, and until next time, this is Kodak signing off.